Most guitar players think the CAGED system is about learning 5 shapes, but in reality it's the master key that unlocks the entire fretboard. Here's the truth so far. The CAGED system has probably confused you, bored you, or just flat out failed you. That's only because you've been shown it wrong. Today I'm going to show you how the pros actually use the CAGED system. And if you want to stick to your goals of being a master guitar player in 2026, then understanding the CAGED system properly is going to change the way you see your fretboard forever. Let's get into it. So what we're going to talk about first is what people already know about the CAGED system when they first come and see someone like me for a guitar lesson. So what you can see on the slide in front of you here is a C major chord in the open position, okay? Now the next shape along from this is what we call the A shape of a C major chord. So what I've done is I'm playing a C major chord that you'll probably already know as a C major bar chord, okay? So the notes here that I've got a C, I've got G, C, and then I've got an E, okay? So it's a C major chord, but if I take that shape and put it into the open position like this, it looks like an open A chord, okay? So that's why people refer to this as a C chord, key of C, but in an A looking shape. Okay. Then the next one along from this, we have a C chord in its G shape. So this shape plugs directly in to our A shape, because what we do is we keep this little bar in the middle that looks like the open A. We keep that with the first finger, and then right next door to that we put the third, second and first finger, which if I take that down here, it looks like an open G chord. So we call this a C major chord, but in its G shape. Now the next one along from this that plugs directly into where our third finger was, this will look like a C major chord in its open E shape. Again, because if I take this back down to the open position, it looks like an open E chord. And finally, we have a C chord that looks like an open D shape, okay? Now the problem with thinking about the CAGED system like this is that it leads to a lot of confusion in terms of what shape you're in and what key you're in. So what we're going to look at now is reordering the shapes of CAGED into EdCAG. Okay, so on the screen in front of you now, I've now put the EdCAG system. Now, nobody was ever going to remember the name, the EdCAG system, because that is not a word that's in the English language. But what we're going to do is we're basically going to play through the 5 shapes of an E major chord. And what we need to do here is something very, very important. We're going to change the naming system so that we have a number system, okay? So this is an open E chord, as you probably already know watching this video. But what we're now going to do is we're going to call this E shape 1, or position 1, or zone 1, something along those lines. But what we want to forget about is that this is an E chord in its E shape. That terminology is confusing and it leads to problems. So let's call this E shape 1. So directly along the fretboard from that, I can now play another E major chord, but this time we're going to call this E shape 2. The next one along from this we will call E shape 3. Then have E in shape 4. Lastly, right next door to that, we have E in shape 5. Now, by having a numbered system for the chord shapes, it makes it much easier for us to visually spot the scaffold around the major chord shapes that we're basing our CAGED system off of. What we're going to do next is we're going to not start with an open chord. We're going to change this to the key of A major, and we're going to start from the bar chord here at the 5th fret, which we'll now call A shape 1. Okay, so what you have in front of you now, guys, is an A major chord in position 1. In brackets, I've kept the E shape terminology there for those of you that will be still hanging on the way that you've learnt this in the past. But I really seriously do encourage you to know that this is called an A major chord in position 1. Now what I've also put on the fretboard diagram here is a hollow note marker for where the root notes are. In every position of your CAGED shapes, it's very important to know where those root notes are. And that's for something that will come later when we're talking about playing through key changes using the CAGED system and all of that good stuff. So if we now move on to the next chord form, this would now be an A major chord in position 2. And again, your root notes would be here and here. If you move on to the next position, you've got an A major chord in position 3, with the root notes being here and here. We just move that up into an A major chord in position 4. We have the root notes here and here. And lastly, we just want to have a look at an A major chord in position 5, which is all the way up here. It's very hard to hold. Don't forget, you won't be looking at holding these chords in rhythm guitar very often. If that's too difficult for you to do, you can also take this down an octave and place it here. This is more about fretboard visualization, and it's a way of seeing the guitar neck rather than a way of playing. And that's something that we'll discuss when we talk about using melodic concepts within the cage system as well. Now we've looked at the numbered system for looking at these shapes, so that we're looking at shapes 1 to 5 rather than looking at shapes E and D and C, etc. We also want to look at this from a minor perspective. Okay, so it's very important that you understand the caged minor chord system as well. Now all that's going to change, because I'm keeping this in the key of A, is I'm going to be flattening the thirds. In the key of A major, we would have had the notes A, C sharp and E, so that would mean that we would have a C sharp here. That's going to be lowered a semitone in this chord, so we now get this. So this is the shape for an A minor chord in position 1. Of course, the root notes don't change because notes are in a fixed position on the guitar neck. Now here we're going to have a look at A minor in position 2. When you go up to your A minor chord in position 3, this is one of the hardest chords to hold on the guitar. And again, you won't be using this from a rhythm guitar perspective, but you will need to be visualizing it. For example, when we want to base minor pentatonic ideas around that position, or when you want to play arpeggios. This is the A minor chord form, and what I would do is put the first finger on at the 9th fret on the G string, then put the 2nd and 3rd fingers at the 10th fret on the D and B strings respectively, and then finally put the 4th finger at the 12th fret on the A string. That's the easiest way to put that chord onto the guitar. Next, we need to scoot along and play the A minor chord in position 4. This will be the bar chord shape that most of you know already as a 5th string bar chord. Lastly, an A minor chord in position 5, the aforementioned G shape that we're going to be looking to sort of forget that terminology and think in terms of numbered shapes. So how you would finger this, you'd use finger 4, finger 2, and then flatten out finger 1. Be careful you don't flatten it all the way out to a major third, because that can sound pretty awful if you do. Okay, so that's the basic structure of the major and minor caged chord system. What we're now going to look at is how you align the most important scale, your pentatonic scale, which is the fundamental soloing tool for rock, blues, jazz, fusion, and pretty much every other kind of guitar player out there. We're going to look at how that aligns to the cage system so that you can have a chord scale relationship. Okay, so what we have on the screen in front of us now is the A minor pentatonic in position 1, or otherwise known as the E shape. Now, many of you watching this will know this scale as the basic pentatonic box or some other name like that. What I want you to start thinking about is that this is what we should be thinking of as a position 1. Because if you can command all 5 positions, that's when you're going to be able to move freely up and down the neck when you're playing your solos. So when you're practicing something like this, it's very important to play the chord so you can see your A minor triad chord that we're playing here, and then play the scale shape around it. And something else that I've put on the screen in front of us right now is I have labelled up the voicing for that minor pentatonic scale. Something else which is really, really good for giving you command of your improvisation is being able to understand that this is your root, this is your minor third, this is your fourth, this is your fifth, this is your flat seven. So as you can see inside the shape, I have put in the actual interval that you're playing from that shape. Very, very important information for you to understand so that you can hit specific target notes when you want to in your solos. So if we move on to shape 2, this is where you would want to be able to play a shape 2 minor chord like this, and then be able to play this minor pentatonic scale shape around it. So we're still playing the same A minor pentatonic scale, but this time we're starting it on the minor third rather than the root, and then we play through perfect fourth, fifth, flat seven, root, minor third, and then just carry on all the way to the top. Now at this point you might be looking at this going, oh, I know that I now need to know the 5 shapes of the minor pentatonic, or I really need to get more to grips with this cage system stuff so I can start playing at a higher level and all of that. If you want a detailed course that's going to take you by the hand and take you through all of this stuff, the Cutting Edge Guitar Blueprint is my free course that will just get you into all of this stuff so that you can work on it at your own pace at home. Check that out at the links in the description. Okay, so let's now move on to shape 3. So what we would want to do here is be able to play the chord form and then be able to align this new shape of the minor pentatonic, shape 3, around that chord structure. Then of course want to be able to do that with shape 4. So here is our shape 4 chord. And on the screen in front of you now is A minor pentatonic position 4, the full scale form. Looks and sounds like this. And lastly, we have shape 5. So here is our chord form, really hard to hold up there. And then we lastly have A minor pentatonic in position 5. Once you're able to align all of the different chord forms with one of the scale forms, you're well on your way to understanding the fretboard at a high level. Now what I've covered here is the basics in terms of just major and minor chords, and then looking at adding minor pentatonic to minor chords right now. Something that you want to be very aware of going forward is that all types of chords, so all of your major 7s, minor 7s, dominant 7s, minor 7 flat 5s, altered chords and more can all be played in the cage system, and you can align a scale or mode with every one of those. So this is a very powerful system that you can align every musical device to it. You can align all of your arpeggios to it, any modal scale, any triad that you can think of. It will all neatly fit into the cage system, which means it's a very powerful way of seeing the fretboard. Don't fall into the trap though that it's a way of playing. It's not a way of playing, it's just a way of seeing your visual fretboard markers. So what we're going to talk about next is how you would use the cage system in order to play things. So let's now look at how you develop vocabulary with this system. Okay, so what you can see on the screen in front of you now is a line that I have composed around the shape 1 area for the minor pentatonic scale. Now what I've done is I've embellished this with some major thirds and some flat 5s. So I'm borrowing notes from the blues scale. And also by blending in the minor third and the major third, we get a really cool bluesy sound that fits a dominant blues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this line for you over a blues backing track. Sounds like this. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So by developing lines that live within the shape, when it comes to the time that you're going to play at a blues jam, or if you're playing a gig with a band, you're sitting at home just jamming over your favourite backing tracks, you have things to play. Now you want to devise tons and tons of runs and licks and lines that you can play in every caged position. So here's another one in shape 4. So as you can see on your screen in front of you right now, I've put another bluesy kind of line in a similar vein in shape 4 of the minor pentatonic scale. It looks like this. So again, what I'm doing is I'm borrowing notes that will allow me to play things like flat 5s and blended major thirds, but I'm using this minor pentatonic shape 4, and I'm actually playing this around a dominant 7th chord rather than a minor 7 chord, because we're going to have the major third in there to play over this dominant blues. But basically I'm using that template that we discussed earlier by looking at the fretboard knowledge to create vocabulary. Let's listen to this in context over the backing track. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4. By developing licks, lines and runs in every one of the 5 positions, you'll be able to move up and down the neck, playing something in any position, and then also as well you can align this with your key changes, which we'll discuss in a bit. But the next thing that you want to find out is how do you go about playing ideas that move entirely along the length of the guitar neck so that you're not stuck playing it in each position. So let's have a look at one of those. Okay, so what you can see on the screen in front of you right now is a linear, what I call a linear pentatonic run that would be used by modern rock guitar players like a Vinnie Moore kind of player. So what I'm doing is I'm playing in the first beat this kind of idea in shape 1 of the pentatonic scale. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that pattern into every single one of the shapes. Now this is how you end up breaking out of shapes. When people are asking that question, what they're looking for is this kind of answer. So what I'm doing, in shape 1 there, we play this pattern and then we just move it through all 5 shapes. So here it is in shape 2, slowly. Then we're moving it up to shape 3, then shape 4, shape 5, then to shape 1 in the octave position, then with a bendy kind of exit. So the idea is that as I'm playing each part of this, I'm visualising shape 1, then I'm visualising shape 2, etc, etc. But when you play it all together as one seamless idea, no one really knows that you're playing specific shapes, you're just playing along the length of 2 strings really. So let's hear this run in context over a modern rock backing. That's how you look at using the 5 shapes of the pentatonic to connect up the fretboard. Now don't forget you can do this with arpeggios, modal scales, you can do it with triads, you can do it with any musical device you like. So if you were looking for a course of programs that will show you how to learn your fretboard inside and out, perfect up your technique and then develop the musical vocabulary to be able to do all of this, in the links in the description you'll find a huge discount on my entire course bundle right now. So the last thing that we want to talk about here today is how you can use the caged system to be able to play through chord or key changes. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so for the last part of this video what we're going to do is imagine that we're playing over an imaginary chord progression that goes from an A minor into a C minor, then we're going to go to a D minor, we're going to go to an F minor, and then we're going to go to a G minor. Now if those chords were playing going by at speed, it would be a real headache to be able to play over them if we weren't able to utilize the power of the caged system. So what this next couple of slides are going to show you is how you are able to play all of those keys in one position by using the power of the caged system. So if I wanted to play over the A minor chord in this part of the guitar neck, I would use, if you were just going to play basic pentatonic fragments, I would just be able to play the minor pentatonic. So here's my A minor chord. I can see my root notes. Here's my A root notes. It tells me that I'm in position 1 for the key of A. So there's the chord, and here, as you can see on the screen, is your scale form. So I said about in the chord progression, the next scale that we would, or the next chord that would come by would be a C minor. So on the slide you can see that C minor pentatonic position 5 fits perfectly in this part of the guitar neck. So where this would all come from is as the C minor chord would come in on my backing, what I would do is I would be looking for the C root notes, which are highlighted up in red, so you can see those there. That would tell me that I need to be playing the shape 5 chord, or visualizing the shape 5 chord at least. And then underneath that, or over the top of that, I would be able to play a C minor pentatonic scale in shape 5 to be able to hit that key. So the next chord in our imaginary chord progression is a D minor. So firstly, I'd want to be able to visualize the chords, and where I do that from is I would play the D root notes, which are highlighted in red. So I've got a D here and I have a D here. Okay, so that means that I would be able to play a position 4 or an A-shaped chord. Now the scale that fits that, of course, would be D minor pentatonic position 4. Looks like this. So the next chord in our imaginary chord progression was an F minor. So again, I'd want to be able to locate my root notes first. So I'd have an F at the 8th fret on the A string, and then I'd also have one at the 6th fret on the B string, highlighted in red on the fretboard diagram there. That would tell me that the chord that I have is an F minor in shape 3. And then I would be able to use a shape 3 minor pentatonic scale to be able to hit that part of the guitar neck. Lastly, G minor. So the G minor root notes are at the 5th fret on the D string and the 8th fret on the B string, highlighted there in red. So I'm going to play the G minor chord in shape 2, okay? And then that would mean that if I wanted to be able to solo around this, as you can see on the screen, a G minor shape 2 minor pentatonic scale would allow you to do so. Now if you've put in the hard yards so that you've got vocabulary for each of the 5 shapes, as those chords would go by, you'd be able to visualize immediately which scale fits each, and you'd also have licks and lines and runs to be able to play so that you could improvise over those changes. Being able to play over chord changes is an incredibly difficult part of playing the guitar, but it is something that allows you to sound incredibly musical, and it is probably where the most sophisticated guitar playing is at. Although there are players out there that use lots of other systems, the CAGED system is one particularly good way for being able to see your fretboard. Not a way of playing, but a way of seeing. Now, I love other systems like 3 notes per string, and all over my channel I will talk about the virtues of those systems. What I believe in as the best approach for fretboard knowledge is to take the best parts of your CAGED system and the best parts of the 3 notes per string system and mold those together so that you can play sophisticated licks and lines combined with runs and all of the shreddy kind of elements that you'd be able to do so that you can play a wide range of styles and genres. Now, if you want to go really in deep on all of that stuff, if you check out the links in my description below, I have a whole host of courses that will take you through all of that stuff. Also, if you're ready for your next lesson here, YouTube is a pretty smart platform and it knows which lesson I have done will be really, really beneficial for you to watch next. So click away on that and I'll see you in the next video.